the UK. The heat by day and the lack of relief by night mean that for some people this can be a health issue and it can cause problems to infrastructure, so an extreme heat warning continues to be enforced through the weekend. Now, overnight there will be some thunderstorms breaking out across northern England, parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's the first signs of a change on the way. First though, on Sunday, for many places it's another very warm night, a warm start to the day, and then temperatures rise once again into the 30s for much of England, Wales, and another very warm day for southern and eastern Scotland. But northern and western Scotland, Northern Ireland sees thunderstorms develop. Now, these will be hit and miss. They'll occur more widely up and down the country on Monday, but where they do occur, the risk of flash flooding.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness,
and then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight in The Big Question, with the FBI raiding the former President Donald Trump's Florida home in a seemingly politically motivated attack which has sparked outrage, and with Joe Biden losing the plot by the day, has Trump been gifted the White House in 2024? We'll hear from all sides on that one, including a man that knows Donald Trump intimately well. My Mark Meets guest is one of the greatest historians in the country, Martin Whittock, who's written about the Vikings, Jesus Christ, Adolf Hitler and Russia. By God, that lad's got range. He'll give his unique perspective on why human beings always do battle. Plus, he'll give his predictions about when the war in Ukraine will end and who wins. In my take at 10, unless you want to be a lawyer, doctor or architect, I'm not sure there's any point going to university, given that these woke organisations' latest move is to ban, wait for it, books. You couldn't make it up. Find out more at 10. And in my big opinion, in just 2 minutes' time, I'm sorry, eco-zealots, we're supposed to eat meat. Stop me eating that steak at your peril. I'm going to be speaking out against a proposed meat tax. You know you can shove that one, don't you? A busy 2 hours to come, lots to get through, big debate with wit, as always. I'll see you after the headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Mark, thank you. Good evening. I am Bethany Elsey, here to bring you up to date from the GB newsroom. After England's driest summer for 50 years, a drought has been declared, with the Environment Agency warning it could last into next year. Southern, central, east and southwest England are the regions currently affected. More water companies could now enforce stricter measures to conserve supplies, including further hosepipe bans. Yorkshire Water is the latest to do so. The Environment Secretary George Eustice says it's not a big ask.
We're in a very strong position now, stronger position than we've ever been, to deal with these sorts of drought conditions. But as I said, it's still the hottest, driest July since 1935, the driest summer in 50 years. To have in some parts of the country a hosepipe ban is a relatively small sacrifice.
A man's in custody after author Sir Salman Rushdie was stabbed on stage during an event in New York. The 75-year-old was about to deliver a lecture when he was attacked. The event interviewer was also attacked, suffering a minor head injury. Rushdie has faced several death threats over his writing, including a fatwa in the 80s over the satanic verses. The New York governor says the state condemns what happened.
An individual who has spent decades speaking truth to power, someone who's been out there unafraid, despite the threats that have followed him his entire adult life, it seems. He's getting the care he needs at a local hospital. We'll be giving more information on the identity of the perpetrator and the case that will be brought in that part of the state. So.
The UK economy shrank by 0.1% between April and June. The Office for National Statistics says the phasing out of COVID spending is partly to blame. It's a big step down from the first 3 months of the year when GDP grew by 0.8%. And Boris Johnson's admitted the current help for people struggling with the spiralling cost of living isn't enough. It's as the new price cap predicts the average family's annual energy bill could reach £5,300 in April. The outgoing Prime Minister insisted there'll be more help for hard-hit households, regardless of who succeeds him.
The cash is not only coming through now and has started to come through, but will continue to come through over the weeks and months ahead.
But the people are saying it's not enough. It's not enough.
And in addition, what we are doing is making sure that we have the fiscal firepower, we have the cash to help people more at those two key points, in October and in January.
And rail passengers will face disruption again tomorrow as drivers at 9 train companies walk out over pay and conditions. West Coast Services, LNER, London Overground and South Eastern will be affected, and some parts of the country will have no services at all. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Mark.
Many thanks to my good friend Bethany Elsie back in an hour's time, of course, with another news bulletin. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight in The Big Question, with police raiding the former President Donald Trump's Florida home in a seemingly politically motivated attack which has sparked outrage. And with Joe Biden losing the plot by the day, has Donald Trump been gifted the White House in 2024? We'll hear from all sides on that one, including an influential US talk show host that knows Trump intimately well. My Mark Meets guest is one of the greatest historians in the country. Martin Whittock has written books about the Vikings, Jesus Christ, Russia, Adolf Hitler, and he'll give his unique perspective on why human beings always seem to do battle. Plus, he'll give his predictions about when the war in Ukraine will end and just who will win the spoils. So, in my take at 10, unless you want to be a lawyer, doctor or architect, I'm not sure there's any point going to university, given that these woke organisations' latest move is to ban, wait for it, books. That's right, universities are banning books. You couldn't make it up. Find out more at 10. In the news agenda with my panel, who's to blame for water shortages? We'll speak to the Spectator's Ross Clark on that one. Are companies guilt-tripping us into making charitable donations? Have you been in a shop and been trying to pay for something and the cashier says, oh, do you want to give us £1 for Ukraine? How do you feel about that? We'll discuss that later. And is it wrong to give kids expensive gifts, even if you can afford them? Reacting to all those stories and many more are my fantastic panel of political and social commentator Lynn May, brand new voice to the show. Welcome, Lynn. A very good friend of mine, a man who agrees with at least 5% of everything I say, the very talented and always articulate former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards. Great to see you again, Peter. And another old pal, columnist and security specialist, Charlie Peters. I feel safer just having him here. Now, I want to hear from you throughout the show. Mark at gbnews.uk. This show has a golden rule. Do you know what that rule is? We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. So there you go. A very busy 2 hours to come. Big debates, big guests, and always big opinions. Let's start with this one. Eco-extremists are set to beef up their campaign against the traditional British diet by proposing, wait for it, a meat tax. That's right, a meat tax, which would see us pay more for pork, lamb and chicken, and could potentially see a levy on dairy products and other animal-derived food. What a load of bull. Why let the facts get in the way of the truth, which is that as omnivores, which means we eat everything, we have survived and thrived on a mixed diet of vegetables and animal protein. And as we've evolved over millions of years, we now find ourselves in command of nature and at the top of the food chain, the foremost species in the history of the planet by a mile. So I'd suggest we're doing all right on a meat-based diet. But why let the facts get in the way of a good story when eco-warriors, non-governmental bodies and even corporations like supermarkets are pushing a plant-based diet, which involves packaged, processed foods, which are chock full of water, vegetable oils, sugar, and Frankenstein ingredients like soya and pea protein. Plant-based is a gold rush for so-called big food, the processed food industry, who have been making us fatter and sicker for years. Plant-based food production involves far more water for things like almond milk than cow's milk, and relies on vast monocrop agriculture, spraying vegetables and other things with an airborne slurry of fertilizer and pesticides. Let me tell you, vast fields of wheat, corn and soy is a disaster for biodiversity and the soil, the self-same soil which is enriched by ruminant animals like cows and sheep. Plus, there's all the packaging involved in plant-based food and the air miles. But that's the least of it. A plant-based diet doesn't seem to be great for your health either. Last year, a study from University College London revealed that vegan children grow up shorter, with weaker bones than those who eat meat. It found 5 to 10-year-olds on plant-based diets were on average 3 centimetres shorter. They also had 4 to 6% lower bone mineral content and were more likely to become deficient in vitamins like B12 than omnivores. Whilst medics in that study recommended a litany of supplements to prop up a plant-based diet, the University of Vienna have this week urged vegans to do weightlifting. Vegans weightlifting, are you sure? They've barely got the energy to lift an avocado. Austrian researchers told the Mail newspaper our study showed resistance training offsets diminished bone structure in vegan people when compared to omnivores. It gets worse. You may want to put down that corn on the cob. Take a listen to this. Health officials from the University of Leeds are warning that women are a third more likely to break their hip if they're on a vegetarian diet. A third more likely. Research has followed 26,000 women for 20 years and said some vegetarians may lack enough nutrients for good bone and muscle health, which raised the risk of breaks. Now, why would that be? Well, because meat and fish and eggs and cheese are full of this wonderful stuff called protein. I don't know if you're aware of it. And animal products are far higher in so-called bioavailable protein than their plant-based rivals. That means it's absorbed more easily into the body and used for the growth of muscles. Now, I'm a libertarian, so what goes on your dinner plate is entirely up to you. But this mission creep against meat must be called out and must be stopped. Not only is eating meat a human right, we should be able to eat what we want. These reports demonstrate it's necessary for human health. Mark my words, with all of the extra carbs and unhealthy industrial vegetable fats like sunflower and rapeseed oil, plant-based Britain will be fatter and sicker than ever. So a plant-based diet requires extra vitamin pills just to make it healthy. It requires the consumption of mass-produced junk food, which, by the way, isn't cheap. And it leaves women with weak hips and delivers shorter children. Plus, you've got to do weight training just to get some strength in your bones. Not a ringing endorsement, is it? Of course, if it's your life choice not to eat meat or indeed a religious or cultural reason, fair enough, good luck to you. I've got close friends who are vegans and they love it. But this is the culture of coercion when we start talking about meat taxes. The culture of coercion that began during the pandemic, in which choices that people make for themselves are enforced upon the rest of us, muzzling our faces with those worthless, environmentally catastrophic masks, locking us in our homes, stopping us from going to work in the unproven hope that lockdowns would stop COVID, which, of course, they didn't. Pressurising people into taking a vaccine that doesn't stop the spread of the virus and which brings with it its own risks. So here we are in the age of coercion, in which unelected technocrats and an overgrown profligate state are now seeking to dictate every aspect of our lives, including what we eat. Eventually, there'll probably be a modern form of rationing, in which your ribeye steak will be weighed out by a butcher following government quotas. The state will decide what kind of boiler you use, how many lights go on in your house, and what time of the day it's acceptable to have dinner or make a cup of tea. This is not conspiracy, folks. This is reality, as reported in The Telegraph last month. There's the headline, Switch dinner times and turn down the thermostat, how to survive the winter energy crisis. Just a suggestion at this stage, I'll grant you, but as we've learnt over the last couple of years, what starts as a suggestion ends in an instruction. If you can't even decide when that you're having your cup of tea, this is not Britain at all, is it? Just a member of some hellish global confederation with our Prime Minister as a mere figurehead. GBNews is the People's Channel, and the only answer to all of this is people power. Peacefully and democratically, of course. The gradual curtailment of our freedoms, including what goes on our plate, is a template they tried out during the pandemic and with which they had unexpected success. So they'll keep on doing it. The idea of bodily autonomy, whether it's what goes in your arm or indeed in your gob, will soon be a thing of the past if it isn't already. So I say no to meat taxes. Well-raised meat, fish and eggs should in fact be subsidised and made cheaper to fix our health crisis. I say no to processed plant-based junk food and no to our great British farmers being bankrupted by these policies or seeing their land repurposed and sold off, rendering cows, sheep and goats as rare a sight in the British countryside as Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster. For as long as we're on this planet, we decide what we eat. I can't believe I'm even having to say this, but here we are. For those that seek to destroy British farming and make us weaker, sadder, fatter and sicker with a diet which is inappropriate for human health, frankly, you can burger off and get your hands off my sausage. Marks and Spencer, cooked in a microwave, absolutely delicious. Reacting to that and all of the big stories of the day are a brand new voice on the show, political and social commentator Lynn May, former editor of Labour List, broadcaster and writer Peter Edwards, and columnist and security specialist Charlie Peters. Lynn, let me start with you. How do you feel about a meat tax?
Well, if I've got the choice, I will not be paying that. And I just think that's a way of them trying to get money. And I cannot stand people saying that it's the healthier option. I grew up a vegan. It made me anemic. I had lack in iron. My mum is still a vegan. However, she spends enormous amounts on supplements, and not the average person is going to be able to do that. So I don't see, during cost of living, why they would even suggest this now. Read the room. Now is not the time.
Plus, Lynn May, I've got concerned about the impact on the natural environment of a plant-based diet. As I pointed out in my Big Opinion monologue, if you're going to be eating wheat and soya and corn, that is vast monocrop, entire fields dedicated to the growth of one vegetable. And the only way they can make that work is with chemical fertilizers and pesticides.
Well, this is the thing, Mark. For people that are saying, go vegan, they always seem to be this sort of, heal the world, hold hands, sing kumbaya. But the more people that go vegan, we're actually taking away the staples from developing countries such as chickpeas, avocados, and it's driving the prices up. So do they really care about healing the world like they pretend they do?
Peter Edwards, you're a fine figure of a man. There's no way you'd have those abs and those guns if it wasn't for a few ribeye steaks.
Well, Mark, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I've not eaten meat for 20 years. But perhaps in a rare moment of agreement, I must say, no new taxes, at least on your dinner, is not the right answer. And I haven't eaten meat all for a long time, and I never will again. But everyone should be allowed individual choice. And I'm unclear about the reasons for this. To be fair, it's not politicians that suggested it. It's green groups, or as you said, eco-extremists. But what are the reasons? It's shifted in my lifetime from animal cruelty to methane gases and so on emitted by cows. I won't spell out the detail of where the gas comes from in case anyone's eating their supper. But I don't think giving up meat is going to change things dramatically. Bear in mind, China is building the equivalent of one coal-fired power station every single day. So if we want to think globally about what's happening to our environment, it's probably not what's coming from the rear end of cows. We've got to be realistic. And I think I'd say, as someone who's perhaps a bit more of a creature of Westminster, there's no way that any mainstream party should go into the next general election saying, we will tax your dinner. It's not the right answer.
Indeed. I mean, Peter Edwards, just picking up on that, and, as I mentioned also in my Big Opinion monologue, if it's your life choice not to eat meat, good luck to you. But I'm concerned about public health in relation to plant-based, not just because of the points made by Lynn May, but also, as mentioned, if you go veggie, especially if you go vegan, you're going to be eating a lot more of those seed oils that many consider unhealthy, sunflower oil, rapeseed oil, corn oil, but you'll be eating a lot more carbohydrates, won't you? Pasta, rice, potatoes. We're going to get fatter.
No, I don't agree with that, but I think we've got to allow room for individual judgment. We all have choices to make about what we put in our body, and maybe I'm not the best advocate because every time I see myself on your screen, I look thinner and thinner, so I'm not the best advocate for giving up meat, at least visually. But people have to take responsibility for themselves, and whether people are having fry-ups every day with lots of meat or processed food that's plant-based, it's entirely down to them, and for kids, it's down to the parents. It's individual responsibility. And the other thing I'd say, actually, and I suspect, because I do eat some vegan food, although I'm not vegan, is at the moment, vegan food isn't terribly cheap. Now, I suspect that will change over time, but I came into politics, I tell you this briefly, because I'm worried about poverty. And actually, if you're a poor family, you can afford a meal out at McDonald's. And yes, they do have vegan stuff, but a lot of McDonald's is meat, and there's a perhaps slightly tired fillet of fish, as they call it. But McDonald's is a cheap meal out, and if you're facing tough times in your family, you should be allowed that, and that should be kept at an affordable rate.
I don't mind a filet of fish, I've got to say. And Peter Edwards, let me tell you, you're a handsome devil, and whenever you're on, the ratings go up because people love that handsome face of yours. Charlie Peters, welcome back to the show. A meat tax, is this the way that we save the planet?
Absolutely not, but it is a great excuse for people who want to be coercive and find a new opportunity to put some panic on the plate to push their way into our personal lives. As Peter said, they had the excuse previously about your health, and now they have the excuse with your ecological concerns with the world. But really, these green groups, they are seeking to do a sort of moral emancipation through our own lifestyles. They are seeking to mend the problems in their heart and their fears and their concerns by pushing the problem on you and I. I don't agree with it. Hands off my ribeye steak.
OK, very briefly, Charlie, because I need to get to my next guest. My other big concern about plant-based is that, we have an image of people eating avocados and cashew nuts and big salads, and I've got no objection to any of those things. But the reality of plant-based is highly processed, manufactured food, courtesy of the big food industry, who are already making us sick and fat.
Absolutely. Healthy body, healthy mind. This is certainly connected. When people eat fresh, natural food, they feel better and they look better.
Lots to get through. I think you'll agree we're travelling first class with my panel tonight. Lots more from the wonderful Peter Edwards, also Charlie Peters and Lynn May. But next up, has Donald Trump been gifted the next election? We'll speak to a very successful US talk show host that knows the man intimately well. And later in the hour, who's to blame for water shortages? We'll speak to the brilliant Spectator and Telegraph journalist Ross Clark. Lots to get through. We don't do boring, not on my watch. Have a sausage.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Big news stateside. Donald Trump's private residence in Florida, Mar-a-Lago, was raided in what many consider to have been a highly politicized attack by the FBI. So, is it a PR own goal by the Democrats? Has the White House been gifted to Donald Trump in 2024? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome leading author and top psychiatrist, in fact, a woman known as America's psychiatrist, Dr. Carol Lieberman, and a man that knows Donald Trump intimately well, host of the incredibly popular America First podcast, and a key former aide to Donald Trump, Sebastian Gorka. Sebastian, let me start with you. Great to have you on the programme. If Mr. Trump decides, President Trump decides to run, is the White House his?
After what happened this week, Mark, it's going to be a cakewalk, as we say here. So this is an absolute outrage. A man who has the highest security clearances as former president will carry them to his grave, has his home raided, never happened before in American history. The Attorney General gives a press conference yesterday for 3 minutes, refuses to take questions, doesn't give the justifications. Now they're leaking things about its nuclear launch codes. It's a farce, it's a farrago. When enemies of his who utterly detest my old boss, like Andrew Cuomo, the former disgraced governor of New York, tweets out, if the Department of Justice doesn't have the smoking gun, this will be seen as political persecution. If Randy Andy's saying it, the presidency is President Trump's.
Although, as usual, liberal figures that dominate American politics and America's great institutions, their move will backfire, won't it, badly, Sebastian? This plays into Donald Trump's hands.
Well, it does. I mean, think of the last 6 years, Mark. So first we had the attacks on him as a misogynist. Then we had the Russia collusion. Then we had the Mueller probe. Then we had first impeachment. Then we had second impeachment. Then we had the January 6th committee. This man has been assaulted, has been persecuted, has been targeted non-stop for 6 years, never committed, never, ever convicted of a crime. They're starting to realize that we have a Gestapo-like FBI out of control. And as a result, people who are in the middle, Mark, people who may not have liked his mean tweets are starting to say, what's going on here? The government is out of control. Maybe we need President Trump back in the White House. So yes, it's not just 74 million who voted for him in 2020. I think it's going to be north.
Now, we've just lost the line to Sebastian Gorka, but Sebastian, thank you so much for joining us, filling us in on your view about that situation with Donald Trump's private address at Mar-a-Lago in Florida being searched by the FBI, a move many consider to be highly politicized. Let's now bring in leading author, a woman quite simply known as America's psychiatrist, the remarkable Dr. Carol Lieberman. Carol, welcome to the show. Before we get to Biden himself, what's your reaction to the storming of Donald Trump's private quarters in Florida?
I am horrified. I am not sure that it's going to be as much of a cakewalk. I don't think we should take things for granted. I certainly hope that he would win and that Trump would win in 2024, but we can't take anything for granted. You know, this isn't really just about Trump. This is something that the American people need to wake up about. You know, I hope that the denial in America about what is really afoot, you know, the forces that are trying to turn our country into into a socialist, if not communist country, take away our freedoms. I mean, this has been a gradual taking away of America, basically, for some time now. You know, it's been insidious, but it's now with the Mar-a-Lago raid, it's not insidious anymore. It's, you know, really a bold move, this is what happens in banana republics. This is not America. And so I hope people wake up and realize that we need a Trump in the White House to bring us back to the America we all knew and loved.
Carol Lieberman will talk about Joe Biden's cognitive health very shortly. That's your area of expertise after all. But what about Donald Trump? I mean, is he of sound enough mind to rescue America? Isn't he himself a little old and bonkers for the job?
You know, it's really not about age. Yes, the older you get, the more chance you have of getting dementia or other kinds of problems. But there are people at 100 years old who could do a better job than Joe Biden at this point, for example. So it's not, you know, I think we really have to be careful about just painting everybody of a certain age with the same brush. But be that as it may, you know, there certainly are. I mean, you know, I've been saying, trying to warn people about Joe Biden since he was running for president, warning people that he had what I called encroaching dementia. And now, as the time has gone by, it is, you know, you don't have to be a forensic psychiatrist to figure this out. Everybody. In fact, there was a poll recently where 59% in America, 59% were either very concerned or somewhat concerned about Biden's mental health. And then the rest were either not at all concerned or not very concerned. So, you know, just the average person is realizing with all of the things that he's been doing that there is a significant cognitive problem.
Well, yes, and we're going to analyze a couple of videos that happened this week, Carol. But it's worth pointing out that if Donald Trump had been president with all of these rather embarrassing videos, he would be roasted by the establishment media.
Yes. I mean, Donald Trump took a test, a cognitive test, when, you know, lots of people were screaming about how unfit he was in various ways. Of course, they were mainly saying that he was unfit because they were claiming he had malignant narcissism. But he took a cognitive test and he passed it. And I actually wrote an article that was published in American Greatness, an open letter to Biden, in which I invited him to take the kind of cognitive test that I give as an expert witness when there is a question of somebody's competency. I am still waiting for the phone to ring. Not yet.
Well, let's take a look at some of the videos this week of Joe Biden in action. This one where he appears to try to shake someone's hand twice. Take a look at this and we'll analyze it. Here we are. Now, Carol Lieberman, America's psychotherapist, what do you think about that? He appears to try to shake this guy's hand twice. It seems like he's forgotten that he'd already shaken his hand after about 2 seconds.
Yes. And then it's so interesting how he puts his hand up to his mouth, like almost, oh, did I make a mistake? Or, what's happening? And he has done this before, where he has turned around after he's given a speech at the podium, and he turns around to shake hands who aren't there. So, could that be it's disorientation, perhaps delusion or hallucination that he thinks he's shaking people's hands? The clip that you just showed was more like a memory lapse, that he didn't remember he had shaken this man's hand before.
Yes, indeed. Well, of course, we've got more damning footage. And the point is that all of this has happened this week. And let's see Joe Biden now rather embarrassing himself. Take a look with the jacket. Okay, so he's... Okay. You go. Well, Dr. Carol Lieberman, it took the leader of the free world about 60 seconds to get his jacket on. What was going on there? And he's dropped his glasses as well. What's your professional verdict of that footage in terms of his cognitive health? What's going on, Carol?
Yes, it's an inability to perceive spatial perception, for example, and then dropping his glasses. He's had these kinds of this fumbling many times, tripping up the stairs to Air Force One. These are all consistent. I mean, in addition to his memory problems, his confabulation, which is where he makes up a story if he can't remember something, his inappropriate over-emotional reactions to things, his abstract ability, that is the worst part of his dementia. He's not able to hold more than one concept in his mind at the same time to be able to choose. And we saw that the first or most strikingly with Afghanistan. And of course, since Afghanistan, the horrendous pullout where he couldn't figure out, once he saw that it wasn't going according to his plan, the original plan, he couldn't figure out what to do next. How do we make up? The Taliban is coming. I didn't expect him to do it like this. And he couldn't figure out a second solution. So since then, of course, we have all the different leaders, Putin and China and all our enemies are realizing that now is the time. We have a very weak president, and now is the time.
Well, yes, and of course, I think you'll agree with me as a medical professional, Carol, that we're not laughing at Joe Biden. We're not even attacking him. I feel sorry for the guy. He shouldn't have this massive responsibility, being the leader of the free world. But there isn't a mechanism in America to impeach a president that's just not up to the job physically, is there?
Well, there is. There's the 25th Amendment. And in fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because I've been saying that since he got COVID, I mean, that COVID causes brain fog in many people, and he already had a kind of brain fog from dementia, right? And then he took Paxlovid, and then he got COVID again, which causes more brain fog. So brain fog on top of brain fog on top of brain fog. And plus, because of his mental and physical vulnerability, chances are that he's going to develop long COVID. And so really there is the 25th Amendment that one can bring in if a president is unfit, either mentally or physically. And why our Congress has not brought forth this 25th Amendment, there are you can come up with various theories of that, but it's very unfortunate. And of course, when you tell people this, they say, well, yes, but Kamala Harris would be even worse or just as bad. We're kind of in a predicament at this point.
Yes, Carol, before I bring my panel in, I wish Joe Biden well. I don't think that he should still be in that job. I think it was actually a criminal of the Democrats to choose him as the presidential candidate, because we knew that he was, one or two fingers short of a Kit Kat long before he became president, but he was the least hated figure in the primaries, and that's why he won. But it was irresponsible to make him president. I think the Democratic Party will never be forgiven for that and will be judged harshly by history, Carol. But here's the point. It's clear that Biden won't run in 2024, but I'm not sure he makes it to 2024 in the first place.
Yes, I would not bet on that. I don't think that he will. I don't think physically or mentally it's going to become, just as the clips that you showed, it's becoming more and more obvious, even to the people who, want to defend him, that really he has these problems. Also, did you notice in the clip about where his wife was helping him on with his jacket, she did not look, she was just trying to sort of pretend that he wasn't really having a problem. And then she kind of walked away. And it's really very sad that she cares more about being first lady than about getting him to a neurologist to look into what kind of dementia he has and getting him some kind of treatment.
Let's bring, Carol, if I can, my panel in. Lynn May, Peter Edwards and Charlie Peters. Let's have a conversation about this. And I'll start with you, Charlie Peters. Do you think that some mechanism ought to be enacted to actually take Joe Biden out of the White House? There was a particular Article 25, as mentioned by Carol Lieberman. Do you think something should be done to take this guy out of office?
Well, the 25th Amendment, could be deployed here. But the fact of the matter is, most of the commentary on his health is pure speculation, because, of course, it's not a particularly good idea to assess someone medically via broadcast, and I don't want to start doing that this evening. But it's clear, isn't it, watching clips of him, that he's clearly struggling with something. Now, it seems to be nearly every single day you see a clip of him enduring some terrible instance of brain fog, looking a little bit lost, not saying the right thing, not doing the right thing, losing his train of thought. But there'll never be sufficient pressure on him to have some sort of assessment or be looked at properly medically, because, of course, a significant portion of the media is very keen on him being kept in that post. If you imagine for a second, if Donald Trump was enduring these many kind of media gaffes and embarrassing moments on stage, there'd be calls every day, every second for him to be looked at professionally. But I have very little hope and very little expectation that that will occur with Mr. Biden.
Peter Edwards, America deserves better.
I thought a lot of what Dr. Lieberman said was dangerous nonsense, I'm afraid. I think it's completely inappropriate to diagnose someone on the basis of video, and I thought the kind of 30 to 60 seconds you showed didn't really support that. I mean, I'd also say it's quite difficult to put your jacket on in a wind tunnel created by a helicopter, but that's a minor point. No one knows about Biden's health, I'd imagine. I perhaps slightly disagree with Charlie, because I'd imagine the opposite. I'd imagine he's being examined all the time. The question is, what public disclosure is that? We know in America there is a different culture where medical records and even tax records are put out publicly. I think there is a legitimate doubt over, and I'm a supporter of Biden, and I think Trump was a disgrace, but I think there is a legitimate doubt over whether Biden will stand again. I'd say briefly, some things that we're talking about are just age, and I think Biden, and I think the jibe about his wife was very unfair, but Biden has done very well to have an attempt at being president when he is approaching his 9th decade, but clearly he's not in the best physical health. Mentally, I've no idea. I just want to make one brief point about political handshakes and gaffes and getting things wrong. We've seen lots of politicians muck up a handshake of all ages. Let me give you 2 quick examples recently that is nothing to do with dementia. Do you remember David Cameron, who was half Biden's age, forgot which football team he supported? And do you remember Ed Miliband, who I supported passionately in the general election debate, gave his speech, walked off the stage and fell over? Stuff goes wrong when you're 40 plus, not just when you're 80.
Lynn, I'll come to you in just a moment, but Dr. Carol Lieberman, Peter Edwards there, suggesting that some of your comments are dangerous.
Yes, okay. I like to make dangerous comments. However, in this case, it is not just on a whim and not just based on those videos that I am saying this. As I mentioned, I have been talking about this since he was running. So it's been, almost 2 years now. And I am talking, I've never met him personally. As I said, I wrote an open letter inviting him, telling him I would give him the test. But I'm basing this on all of my years, not only as a psychiatrist, but as a forensic psychiatrist who has had to determine competency in legal cases, in lawsuits. So I know the signs to look for. And, I think, unfortunately, like a lot of people, whether it's, for Biden or for Trump or whatever, people see things through their own political viewpoints, and it's a little cloudy. You know, they see what they want to see. I mean, you said you liked Biden, so you don't want to see him as having these problems. But I didn't just say this today. I have been saying this for almost 2 years.
Dr. Lieberman, I'm not cloudy. I'm in possession of all my faculties, even if you disagree with my output.
Well.
Dr. Carol Lieberman, I would suggest that the US media are complicit in a cover-up about Joe Biden's mental health.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes, you know, it is so political. Everything that has happened, this country has become so divisive and so political, from pretending that Joe Biden has all his faculties to the raid on Mar-a-Lago. This is a really dangerous time. This is 1984 meets Twilight Zone. And, you know, yes, they are, because it's not really Biden who is calling the shots. You know, that's why he's kept in that position, because there are people behind him, notably Obama, he's the puppet. Obama is the puppeteer. And so they like it that he, you know, isn't really all there.
Lynn May, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I do tend to agree in terms of like the tribalism. If our politics leans a certain way, we want to see certain things or we don't want to see certain things. And I'm not going to speculate about Biden's health. However, as leader of the free world, I think it's wholeheartedly embarrassing to see him, you know, come onto the television, in press conferences, he's forgetting words, and especially at a time of geopolitics where you need someone who's strong and firm and seems to know exactly what they're doing, what they're saying. Again, I'm not going to speculate on his health, but he doesn't seem to publicly know what he's doing on the face of it. And I think that is extremely embarrassing for a lot of Americans. And when I look at the commentary, I can see a lot of Americans are actually regretting voting for the Democrats.
Also, Lynn May, I think that there are national security implications, not just for America, but really the free world. We saw the botched withdrawal of allied forces from Afghanistan on Biden's watch. And also, Lynn May, we of course, have the rather worrying spectacle of the war in Ukraine. And on one occasion, President Biden said that he wanted regime change in Russia, that it wasn't going to be workable or sustainable for Putin to stay in the Kremlin, right? This was quickly denied by the White House hours later. This guy is a national security nightmare.
Yeah, he cannot be affording to be making these mistakes where we are at the world. And I just think also when he was asked to comment, or the White House was asked to comment about the invasion of Trump's property, he said he had no idea. Why does he have no idea? That's concerning for me too.
May I respond to that briefly? Because I'm not sure that's fair. So I think you wouldn't want the president interfering in the operational requirements of the FBI. And had he done so and said, I have every idea because I was behind it all, there'd be a great outrage. And, excuse me, Mark, I have to challenge you as well. You talked about the storming of Trump's home, which was this rather slight garish property we saw a few moments ago that appeared to be almost orange, perhaps like the Donald. But you talked about the storming of Mar-a-Lago. No, we had the storming of the Capitol, which was a criminal act, and we had a law enforcement agency, whether you agree with them or not, carrying out a legal act under powers granted to them by American politicians who are elected. So it's not the storming of Mar-a-Lago.
A final question for all of you, starting you with Peter, then I'll come to you, Charlie, Lynn, and then Carol. First of all, Peter, do you think there should be an age limit on presidents and prime ministers?
No, but I think the court of public opinion or party opinion will deliver its verdict, and that kept Churchill and Clement Attlee going to a relatively ripe old age. I have no idea if Biden will stand, but I suspect these conversations are going on, perhaps with a bit more nuance, but they are going on privately.
How about you, Charlie Peters? Do you think we should have a look at the age and indeed cognitive health of future presidential and prime ministerial candidates?
Good politics is about making a connection with the living, the dead, and those who are yet to be born. And by putting an age limit on or a restriction on seniority, you break that connection, you break those links, and you damage the connection with politics and all ages.
Lynn May?
No, I don't. I think everyone ages extremely differently. And, if you can ensure that you have the faculties, you are of sound mind, I'd rather there be regular tests when you possibly could get to that age. However, no, I don't think there should be an age limit whatsoever.
Dr. Carol Lieberman, I think that Joe Biden is not cognitively well enough to be president. I've seen enough from those videos to have deep concerns that this man has access to the nuclear codes. I also think Donald Trump is too old for the job as well, and I think that the Republicans would be mad not going for a younger model, someone like Ron DeSantis. What do you think?
Well, I think Ron would make a great vice president. I don't think it should be an age limit per se, but yes, I think maybe some kind of basic cognitive test, perhaps when they're running or, before the election would be a good idea.
Dr. Carol Lieberman, wonderful to have you on the show. You are America's psychiatrist, and your website is, let's have a look at this, it's very important, drcarol.com. What she doesn't know about the workings of the brain ain't worth knowing. Thank you, Carol, and many thanks to Peter, Lynn and Charlie, who return in just a moment. But of course, before we get to the break and our next story, we asked you, following the FBI raid on the Mar-a-Lago estate, has Donald Trump been gifted the White House in 2024? The results are that 74% of the 100 who voted agreed that Trump may have secured the next election. That's right, 74% say yes. Lots more to come, including who is to blame for water shortages. We will discuss that with The Spectator's Ross Clark and my panel. Also, later in the show, are companies guilt-tripping us into making charitable donations? And is it wrong to give kids expensive gifts? And we've got the papers at 10:30 and my take at 10, plus Britain's best historian. A very busy show. See you in 2.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Big reaction to my big opinion monologue. Mark, love the show, says Tom. Next time you're told about vegan diets and cow exhaust and burps, ask the person what is chemical formula for them. When the burps rise into the atmosphere, it's then broken down into its constituent parts and returns to Earth as plant food and water, i.e. rain. It helps plants grow. Janice says, Mark, you mentioned folk eating avocado, cashew nuts, etc. Hubby and I are both guilty, as we both eat those quite frequently, but we're both meat eaters and enjoy pork, lamb and beef chicken and even goose. I'll never change my diet as I now suffer arthritis, so wouldn't want my bones and joints to suffer, etc. Janice, God bless you and God bless your lovely bones. I'll get to more of your emails shortly, but it's time now for the news agenda. And you might have noticed it's a bit hot at the moment. And now an official drought has been declared in 8 areas of the UK. One of the driest ever Julys, mixed with some of the hottest temperatures recorded, have left reservoirs critically low. Despite having not built another reservoir for over 30 years, water companies have now introduced hosepipe bans and placed restrictions on their use. But with leaking pipes in London still causing flooding and up to 1/5 of all water being lost through bad infrastructure, who's actually to blame for this drought? Well, let's speak to the brilliant journalist Ross Clark. He writes for The Telegraph and the Mail newspaper and indeed The Spectator. And he wrote a great piece in this week's Spectator on that very subject. Hi, Ross.
Good evening. Hi, Mark.
If you were to read the papers and listen to government messaging and the comments of water companies, you'd think that this drought was all our fault.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the weather has been dry and that's nobody's fault. But as to why we've got water shortages, also partly it's a function of the weather, but it's also a function of how much water is available in the system. And as you said, we haven't had a new major reservoir built in this country, actually for 40 years, since Kielder Water in Northumberland was completed in 1981. And what we've been doing since then really has been sort of sweating the existing infrastructure. I mean, we have all these marvellous, wonderful dams and built in Victorian times right up to the 1970s. And then all that sort of investment stopped. And we've been sort of, relying on that and extracting more groundwater. And we can only do that to a certain extent. If you keep on extracting groundwater, the water table sinks, and we're in a mess, really. I mean, the problem is the water industry, as it's currently constructed, does not have an incentive to build more infrastructure to provide more water. On the contrary, all the water companies are under this sort of duty put on them by Ofwat, the regulator, to try to reduce the amount of water we each use. The old government policy is that we sort of, per head, we reduce our water consumption from 143 litres a day per head now to 111 litres by 2050. And so, I mean, there's no incentive to produce extra water in the system. The water companies are really sort of just trying to make profits by sweating their assets, slashing their costs, but not in investing in new reservoirs. And I mean, we did have a proposal to build one in Oxfordshire at Abingdon, which, in Thames Water area, one of those areas now contemplating a hosepipe ban. But that was squashed by the Environment Agency, and then it was squashed by the government. And, we've been talking about it for 17 years, something now. And, nothing's happened. It's just the same old story with so much of our infrastructure.
Yes, it's a legacy of decades of underinvestment, and like the energy crisis, it can't be fixed quickly, can it, Ross?
No, well, it can't. You can't build a reservoir overnight, and even if you could, it wouldn't fill up overnight. The decisions that should have been made decades ago, many years ago. But as I say, we just didn't make those decisions. We just tried to sweat the existing assets, even though we've got a growing population. And I'm not in favour of wanton waste of water, but it does take a certain amount of water to maintain lifestyles and sanitation and so on. We're trying to sort of do it by sort of bullying the population into using less water rather than... I mean, just one other point to make. I mean, to cut waste, so 2 other things, actually. Firstly, about a quarter of the water that is in the system is leaking out before it actually gets to the consumer, and that's been sort of stubbornly high for years and years, the leakage. But also there's half the properties in the country still don't have water meters. So for that half of the population, me included, the marginal cost of turning on the taps, using a bucketful, putting the hose on is zero. And, when you've got no sort of price mechanism to control demand, you're really sort of condemning yourself to waste and shortage.
Well, I agree. I mean, I think there are parallels with the pandemic, Ross. We all had to stay home to save the NHS. In the end, our NHS is so not fit for purpose that it couldn't handle extra cases of COVID. Unlike a lot of other health systems around the world, we stopped treating cancer and the NHS became the national COVID service just because, frankly, it's broke, it doesn't work. Clearly, there's a similar story with our water systems. Briefly, if you can, in just a few seconds, do you think water privatisation was a mistake?
What's the purpose of privatisation was to introduce private capital, more greater investment, to provide competition and to provide greater efficiency. And I can't see that any of those things have been achieved through privatisation. I mean, one of the things one of the whole things is competition. We do have some competition with gas and electricity and a little bit with the railways, but I think it's asking for trouble when you just hand over state monopolies to create private monopolies, which is what the water system is. And of course,
couldn't agree with you more. Ross, every word of that, amen to that. Brilliant piece in The Spectator. Do come and see us soon, the brilliant journalist Ross Clark. Thank you, Ross. Lots more to come. Next up, in My Take at 10, what is the point in going to university? A big hour to come. You won't want to miss a second.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 10 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In My Take at 10 in just 2 minutes' time. Unless you want to be a lawyer, doctor or architect, I'm not sure there's any point going to university, given that these woke organisations' latest move is to ban, wait for it, books. So why would you bother? Find out more shortly. It might just save you or your kids tens of thousands of pounds. In the news agenda with my panel, are companies guilt-tripping us into giving charitable donations? Plus, tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30. And is it wrong to give your kids expensive gifts, even if you can afford it? My Take at 10 is coming, but first the headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Mark, thank you. Good evening. I am Bethany Elsey, here to bring you up to date from the GB newsroom. A drought in England has been declared after its driest summer for 50 years, with the Environment Agency warning it could last into next year. The regions affected are southern, central, east and southwest England. Further, water companies could now enforce stricter measures to conserve supplies. Yorkshire Water is the latest to introduce a hosepipe ban. Environment Secretary George Eustace says it's not a big ask.
We're in a very strong position now, stronger position than we've ever been, to deal with these sorts of drought conditions. But as I said, it's still the hottest, driest July since 1935, the driest summer in 50 years. To have in some parts of the country a hosepipe ban is a relatively small sacrifice.
Indian-born British author Sir Salman Rushdie is in surgery after being stabbed on stage during an event in New York. The 75-year-old was about to deliver a lecture when he and the event host were both attacked. A man has been taken into custody. Rushdie has faced several death threats over his writing, including a fatwa in 1989 over the publication of the Satanic Verses. Members of the FBI who've searched Donald Trump's home in Florida have removed 11 sets of classified documents, some top secret. A federal judge approved a warrant to carry out a search on Mar-a-Lago. It's after the US government said it's possible the former president had violated the Espionage Act, a law that prohibits passing on or keeping national defense information. Earlier, Trump denied a Washington Post report that the FBI search was for materials related to nuclear weapons, calling it a hoax. The UK economy shrank by 0.1% between April and June. The Office for National Statistics says the phasing out of COVID spending is partly to blame. It's a big step down from the first 3 months of the year when GDP grew by 0.8%. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson's admitted the current help for people struggling with the spiralling cost of living isn't enough. It's as the new price cap predicts the average family's annual energy bill could reach £5,300 by April next year. Rail passengers will face disruption again tomorrow as drivers at 9 train companies walk out over pay and conditions. West Coast Services, LNER, London Overground and South Eastern are some of the lines that will be affected, and some parts of the country will have no services at all. And the Communication Workers Union has announced post office workers will strike on the 26th, 27th and 30th of August in an escalating dispute over pay. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Mark.
Many thanks to Bethany Elsey, who returns in a week's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. Big stories, big guests, and always big opinions. In the news agenda with my panel, are companies guilt-tripping us into giving charitable donations? Have you been in a shop and the cashier has asked you to give more money to Ukraine or some other charity? How do you feel about that? We'll discuss it later. Also, is it wrong to give expensive gifts to kids, even if you can afford it? Plus, we've got another topical game show and tomorrow's papers hot off the press at exactly 10:30 sharp with full panel reaction. Also very excited about my Mark Meets guest. Live in the studio, one of the most respected and prolific historians in the country, Martin Whittock, who's written books about the Vikings, Jesus Christ, Adolf Hitler and Russia. He'll give his unique perspective on why human beings always go to war. Plus, he'll give his predictions about when the war in Ukraine will end and how. But first, it's time for my Take at 10. I wonder if youngsters who borrow tens of thousands of pounds to get into higher education would save themselves a lot of hassle and learn a bit more if they went to the University of Life. At the University of Life, all opinions are welcome. No one's protected from hearing things that may upset them, and it's free. You won't believe this, but a recent Freedom of Information request in the Times newspaper has revealed that 1,000 books, that's right, 1,000 books, have either been withdrawn from reading lists or given special warnings for readers. 10 universities, including 3 from the Russell Group, have withdrawn books from course study lists or made them optional in case they cause students harm. The texts include the 2017 Pulitzer Prize-winning novel The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead, which has been removed permanently from a course reading list at Essex University because of concerns about graphic depictions of slavery. Now, isn't that the point, to learn about the horrors of this evil crime? Is slavery not bad anymore? I'm struggling to keep up. The classic play Miss Julie by August Strindberg has been withdrawn from an English literature model at Sussex University because it includes discussion of suicide. Now, wait a minute, suicide, and surely that's an issue that all people will either have to deal with directly or indirectly in their lives. Don't read about that? OK. And English students at Aberdeen University have been told they can opt out of Geoffrey Chaucer and medieval writing, as the course sometimes entails engagement with topics that you may find emotionally challenging. Well, I'm finding covering this story emotionally challenging. Didn't Chaucer use the C word in his books? Well, it seems appropriate for these woke university bosses. Why don't colleges and universities go the whole hog and do what they really want to do? Why don't they give it the full Chairman Mao China treatment and start book burning? That'll be next. Start Freshers Week with an outdoor bonfire of Shakespeare's greatest works, Charles Dickens and anyone else deemed problematic. When universities start getting rid of books, you know we're at the end of days. Don't forget, universities are bankrolled to the tune of billions by the taxpayer, and we're now paying for them to churn out thin-skinned, intolerant, close-minded young people who in many cases have been bullied into believing a variety of bonkers and highly contested ideas like critical race theory that says you're racist simply because of the colour of your skin. What about bonkers gender ideology, which denies there are two biological sexes, and which, from where I'm standing, appears to be an attempt to end the idea of gender altogether? Gender ideology certainly involves erasing women, medics in the NHS, right of birthing humans, chest feeding, and people who menstruate. It was no doubt university types at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre who decided that one of the greatest females in history, feminist icon Joan of Arc, who died for her beliefs, gets rebadged as they, them for her pleasure. Let me add a stage direction to that show. Shakespeare spins in his grave. Which other great women of history shall we rob of their gender? Perhaps Margaret Thatcher should be rebranded as Michael Thatcher. Mother Teresa could be Father Teresa. Maybe one day Lady Gaga will be Lord Gaga. All of this is Gaga, and it would be funny if it wasn't so dangerous, because terrifyingly, these mollycoddled, narrow-minded, intolerant, woke undergraduates will be our future. Students should be exposed to all literature. They should be able to listen to all visiting speakers and be exposed to a plurality of ideas. All the better if they're sometimes uncomfortable. They should be taught how to think, not what to think. They should emerge from university as graduates with open minds and open hearts. Unless you want to be a lawyer, architect, or a doctor, what is the point of going to university in 2022? Is it worth the hassle? Is it worth the money? You tell me. Millions of British youngsters, in my view, could learn a whole lot more if they attended training and vocational courses, apprenticeships, online study, you name it. There are so many great alternatives. And that's where our taxpayer billions should be going, rather than on these bloated and unaccountable academic institutions. Alternatives to uni come at a fraction of the price, and tens of thousands of young people borrowing money for higher education could instead spend that money on a deposit for a flat, the purchase of work equipment, or they could use the cash to start a small business. The University of Life gets more attractive by the day. It's time now for this. So much music on this show, it's like Top of the Pops, isn't it? It is time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, showbiz, sport, academia, business and beyond. Tonight, one of Britain's most prolific and respected historians, Martin Whittock, who has written bestsellers on the Middle Ages, the Vikings, Jesus Christ, the French Revolution, as well as Russia and the rise of Hitler. Just why do human beings always go to war? And when does this renowned expert on Russian history think Putin's war on Ukraine will conclude? And who might be the victor? Martin Whittock, welcome to GB News.
Thank you for having me.
What are your thoughts about universities taking certain books off reading lists because they might be problematic or distressing to the reader?
I think we have to recognise that students are a lot more robust than we think they are. I mean, I happen to think that our universities are remarkable institutions and are world-leading institutions. I've benefited from them. My children have as well. They're amazing places. But I do think we have to recognise the fact that young people are more robust than we sometimes expect them to be. And I think that the cut and thrust of different points of view is absolutely crucial. And I think part of growing up is recognising that you can have differences with people and learn to live with them. You know, you and I may disagree, but we can disagree in a gracious and a positive way. And I think that has to be integral to all our education. I mean, I'm a comprehensive teacher, was in the past, taught for 35 years. I always said to my kids in my classroom, you can ask questions, you know, as long as you don't swear in front of me, you know, because obviously, you know, there are limits. But you can ask questions, you can raise issues. We must be able to look at difficult questions and difficult issues, because that is what education is all about.
That's right. We saw Professor was it Catherine Stott, I forget, my brain has completely escaped me, Kathleen Stock, who was hounded out of her job from the University of Sussex because she insisted or maintained that there are two biological sexes. Do you think that universities have become ideological echo chambers?
It's hard to tell because I'm not from the higher education sector, so I'm speaking as somebody sort of looking from the outside, so I have to recognise that. But I think there certainly has been a move within some institutions to try to shut down debate, and I think that's a mistake. I think we should be more confident in our views. I think we should not be defensive of our points of view, and I think robust discussion is what education is all about. And I think we need to teach young people to disagree nicely, to be able to have different points of view, to be able to exchange those points of view in a respectful way, and then be able to walk away and say, well, I didn't agree with you, you didn't agree with me, but I'm still not going to beat you up, and you're not going to beat me up either. And we need to have that kind of debate, really.
And surely it wouldn't do students any harm to read a book about the horrors of slavery, even if it's graphic, because that's the point of the book. And I've got no doubt that your book on the Third Reich is pretty graphic too, and your books on the Vikings.
Absolutely. I mean, I happen to have read The Underground Railway, and it is graphic. And there were times that I'm thinking, it's just appalling, I'm shocked, it's terrible. But of course, that was exactly what I was supposed to think, because it is appalling. And I think it is important that we don't isolate ourselves from experiences of reality.
You're a great historian. A perennial theme of your books is war. Why do human beings go to war?
Right, well, as well as being a historian, I'm also a licensed lay minister in the Church of England, so I have a spiritual perspective as well as, if you like, a sociological, historic perspective.
And you've written the unauthorised biography of Jesus Christ.
That is true.
So his people, they didn't give you the nod.
That's right. You know, we tried, but there we go. I think there is something flawed in human nature. I think there is something about us as human beings that is imperfect, that is incomplete, you know, that does compete, that does fight, that we have to deal with. I do not think that human beings are the finished article. And therefore, I think that we have to take into account the fact that there is a reality of evil in the world, there is badness in the world, there's also goodness and beauty and wonderful things as well. And I think that one of the reasons why there is the hurt in the world is because we are flawed people. We are damaged people. But we can overcome that. Obviously, as a Christian, I believe, with the assistance of God, grace can transcend the weaknesses and the failings that we have. But as a historian, I'm also very much aware of the fact that we live in a world of finite resources, in which power speaks to people, in which people get a great deal of a buzz from dominating others. And I think many of the wars that we see in society are generated by people attempting to obviously get their bigger slice of the pie and to get that for their own benefit and the pursuing of their own power. Of course, in some ways that speaks to my spiritual perspective as well, because here are flawed human beings seeking to impose themselves on other human beings. That's not a happy situation, but that's the challenge of living in a flawed world.
Yes, and of course a lot of war is pragmatic, isn't it? It's about territorial ambitions. Various empires who seek to dominate the world with great sort of commercial and social opportunities that brings. Then there is a resource, I suppose, they fight for as well. So we've had wars over oil, and I guess in time we will have wars over things like water and energy.
I think we will. You know, just as we saw Hitler drive to the Caucasus in the Russian campaign to control the oil reserves of the Northern Caucasus. So we'll see people increasingly fighting over water supplies, control of headwaters, because one of the other things that drives war is the desire to control what you might call valuable resources. And valuable resources are measured by the society in which you live. And in the past, it may well have been oil, it may well have been timber, it may well have been people in terms of slaving, sadly. But in the future, I think we're going to see people fighting over the headwaters of the Nile, over whose hydroelectric dam is stopping their water supplies. And I think that's the complexity that lies ahead of us.
You've written some cracking books on the Vikings. Who were they and what did they do? Scandinavian?
Yep, Scandinavian. Basically, people from the end of the 8th century who then explode out of Scandinavia. It lasts from about 780s until about
all these big
1100.
strapping lads, 6'5", blonde-haired, blue-eyed.
Yeah, that's
murderous, brave.
Yes, well, it was the blonde-haired and blue-eyedness. I nearly got him, but it was the strappingness that got me sent home to carry on with the farming.
Never too late.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, basically, a whole bunch of things were going on. There was kingdom building going on in Scandinavia. So there were winners and losers. Losers went abroad to try to get the resources they couldn't get.
And they were very pioneering.
They were indeed, absolutely. We hear of Vikings turn up on camels in Baghdad. I kid you not. We now know from last year that in 1021 there were Vikings settling in Newfoundland in the New World.
And they were fearless and brave and ingenious?
Yeah, well, in many ways, Viking was what you did rather than what you were. So you went a Viking. And another reason why the Vikings exploded out of Scandinavia was because changes in the Islamic Caliphate in the 8th and 9th century shut off silver supplies to Scandinavia. And so elites in Scandinavia had to go taking by force what at one time they'd have traded amber and furs and slaves for. So a whole bunch of different factors fed into this explosion out of Scandinavia.
And they settled in Ireland and across Western Europe.
Absolutely.
And they were very innovative, for example, in boat design, which helped them in their cause, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, basically shallow drafted vessels that could go way up rivers. We see Viking fleets or isolated boats striking inland in Britain, for example, in areas that are miles from the sea. We think, how can that happen? It's because on a shallow drafted vessel, you can go far inland, far more than you can in a modern, deeper drafted vessel. And that allowed them to strike basically not only at the coast, but also inland sites as well.
How did Hitler happen?
How did Hitler happen?
Is it what we're told, that Germany got treated very badly after the First World War, effectively bankrupted in that sort of settlement, all of the reparations, creates poverty in Germany and huge social discontent upon which Hitler capitalises?
I think there's a great deal of truth to that. I think if you want to understand Hitler, you have to look to 1918. You have to look to how the First World War ended, the kind of reparations treatment that happened.
They wanted to effectively break Germany, I would have
Absolutely. The Treaty of Versailles effectively wanted to emasculate Germany, reduce the German army, strip away its colonies, take away its air force, its ability to have submarines. And that was very understandable. I mean, given what had been experienced in the First World War, it's not surprising the Allies wanted to make sure it could never happen again. What they should have been doing, and it's so easy to say this, they should have been thinking, OK, that's behind us. The Kaiser's done a runner to Holland, as it turns out. What can we do to lift this community up and make them partners? And they didn't do it. And they ended up by facing somebody who was not a partner.
Luckily, we had help from the Americans. We had the courage, the character, the moral strength, the vision, the strategic genius of Winston Churchill. And, of course, old Hitler lost the plot towards the end, didn't he?
Certainly did. The other thing you didn't mention was that we had the Russians. And there's a calculation that perhaps as many as 8 out of 10 German soldiers that died in the Second World War was killed by a Russian. That terrible as the costs were on the Western Front, the loss on the Eastern Front were staggeringly huge. Effectively, the Red Army eviscerated the Wehrmacht, and that's not to play down the incredible achievement on the Western Front. It's just to remind ourselves of the titanic nature of the struggle on the Eastern Front.
At a time when Russia was our technical ally and millions of Russians died in that battle.
Indeed, indeed. I mean, tens of millions of Russians died, dwarfing the terrible Western casualties.
You've got 2 books out at the moment because you're that prolific. We've got The Secret History of Soviet Russia's Police State, Cruelty, Cooperation and Compromise, 1917 to 91. How topical, given what's happening in Ukraine?
I think it's very topical. Vladimir Putin was a lieutenant colonel in the KGB. The FSB now and the so-called Soloviki, the people of power, are now more dominant in Russia than ever before. So in many ways, Russia is morphing into a police state in a way that it hasn't done in the first decade after the collapse of communism, but certainly since 2000, we have seen ex-KGB officer Putin take the nation back to a police state in a way in which it never has before. And that has, well, when I say never has before, hasn't happened since the fall of communism, I mean. He's now taking it back to that. And tragically, Ukraine is giving him the opportunity to do that because he's having to dig in even deeper because he's entered into a war situation he cannot win, I think, and it's turning into one of those forever wars, I think, and he's having to double down at home to crush dissidents, to basically emasculate what opposition parties there are in Russia, and to basically sideline the technocrats and bringing the Siloviki, the men of power, and it usually is men, as a matter of interest, of power who have their roots in the secret police and in the military apparatus. And we're seeing a militarization and a secret policeization, if you like, of Russia in a way that we've not seen since the collapse of Soviet communism in 1991.
Gorbachev, the man, of course, responsible for bringing down the Iron Curtain with the help of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, said, you know, his legacy is being torn apart by Putin. He's devastated by what's happening to Russia. So, forever war. So I have my answer then. You don't think that a peace can be brokered this side of Christmas?
I think it's highly unlikely. I think the most it looks like at the moment is it to be a frozen conflict, one of those situations where the Russians cannot land a killer blow. They are being degraded. Their military are being extremely weakened. But on the other hand, Ukraine isn't strong enough to drive them out. I think it's easy to see it turning into a forever war, or if you like, a frozen conflict where neither side can land that decisive blow.
And because of the capture of Russia by all of these figures from the KGB, this police state, which is what Russia now is, then Putin is safe for the foreseeable?
I think so. I mean, they're making a point in the future in which those around him recognise that, in fact, even they are being threatened, their power's being threatened by the kind of chaos he's causing. But at the moment, there is still quite a nationalist surge of support for Putin. There is evidence that a significant number of people do support the situation in Ukraine, only, of course, having access to official news from Kremlin sources. FSB and National Guard are obviously cutting down on any expressions of criticism, and I think at the moment there isn't going to be a coup anytime soon. But then, of course, I didn't see the invasion in February 2022, so don't put your money where what I say. But at the moment, I think it's unlikely.
The Vikings, Hitler, Putin, we've covered quite a lot in 10 minutes, haven't we?
We have.
Look, what a career you've had. Will you come back and see us, and will you do the panel with us as well? Because I'd love to hear your thoughts across all political issues.
I'd be very pleased to. And next time we might even talk about the end times again, which is 2,000 years of the use and misuse of biblical prophecy that I've explored. But I know time's running out now.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. That's right, next time. Let me tell you, both of those books are out now. The Secret History of Soviet Russia's Police State and the aforementioned The End Times Again, 2,000 Years of the Use and Misuse of Biblical Prophecy. Fascinating topic. Many thanks to Martin Whittock. Well, we've got the papers coming at 10:30. Plus, in the news agenda, is it right to give your children expensive gifts even if you can afford it? And how do you feel about being asked for a donation when you're in a shop and the cashier says, will you give £1 to charity? What is your view on that? We'll discuss that next. And the papers at 10:30. See you shortly.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very warm reaction to my interview with the historian Martin Whittock. Thomas says, fascinating interview with Martin, very informative and thought-provoking. Tom, thank you for that. Also, this from Sandra on the University of Life, which I think a lot more of us should attend. Sandra says, Mark, welcome to my world. After 7 years at a state grammar school, I left at 18, having decided university was not for me, since I didn't want to be a doctor, lawyer, architect or teacher. I wanted to work and then study, if necessary, when I found a career I enjoyed. That didn't happen, but having studied both French and Latin, I knew how to learn a language, taught myself Norwegian and landed a job in Norway. Sandra, aren't you resourceful? My children both decided the same and went straight to work at 18. We all feel we made the right decision and now don't want my grandchildren to go to university either because of the present situation and attitudes at these centres of indoctrination. Well, Sandra, so well written. It's like you've been to university. Thank you for that. You know I love getting your emails. Keep them coming. mark@gbnews.uk. Now, more from my panel in the news agenda. As charities struggle to recoup their losses after 3 national lockdowns and the small matter of a pandemic, many are enlisting the help of shops and restaurants, with customers being asked by cashiers at the till or at self-checkout terminals to add an extra £1 to the bill for charitable causes. If it's just you on the self-checkout, you can decide whether or not to pay more. You just say yes or no. But is a cashier asking a customer to their face, especially if they're in a queue, an invasion of privacy? And are people being guilt-tripped into donating at a time when millions are feeling the financial pinch? Are businesses guilt-tripping us into making charitable donations when we pay for our goods? Well, Lynn, what do you think about this? You know what I'm talking about. You're at the self-checkout in the supermarket and it says, do you want to give £1 to Ukraine? What do you think about that?
Why can't they just have a little sign that says, do you want to donate? Then I can choose. Let's say, for example, I wanted to go into a petrol station and top up £30. Before I can even pay, it asks me and there's a queue and then I have to press and, you know, it's very obvious. So now I feel obligated to having to pay and I shouldn't have to feel obligated. I should want to. And I was just looking at some of the figures as well. They're saying, OK, they're struggling, give a thought to the charities. But if you just, and this I'm going to say average, right? So the CEOs, Age UK, over 190,000, Amnesty over 210,000. Like, these are huge salaries. Why can they not actually chip into those salaries before asking us at the checkout?
Yes, and I think what's particularly egregious, and of course I've got no problem with charities, you know, existing and seeking donations. And I donate to a variety of charities by direct debit, which I find quite convenient. But I think it's a particular problem when the cashier, you're in a queue and the cashier says, oh, do you want to give £1 to Ukraine or £1 to NSPCC or £1 to cancer research? And there are people around you, you're going to say yes, aren't you, just to save embarrassment. But we are in a cost of living crisis and I think it's an invasion of privacy.
Yeah, I agree. And it's quite loud. Do you want to... OK.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think? What happened to discretion, Peter Edwards?
Well, discretion exists. I'm not sure this is an invasion of privacy. I certainly think there is an awkward moment, you know, if you're a single parent paying for your weekly shop for your kids and you might feel uncomfortable saying no. But I think we've got to keep in mind 2 things. One, I suspect direct requests to shoppers who tend to be in a hurry won't last, and the other subtler mechanisms, whether it's the old-fashioned charity box that several of my family members used to wave over the years, and probably yours as well, or a sign in a supermarket, or obviously the modern equivalent of a sign on a website, they will endure longer than just being asked, because ultimately I think supermarkets, they do some social good, of course, but they want profits and they're governed by shareholder interests. So I think they might find some of these conversations awkward. What I would say, though, is however awkward we feel, it is absolutely zero compared to what the poor people are going through in Ukraine.
Absolutely right, and that's a really, really fair point. Charlie, it's 10:30, we've got the papers, but let me get a quick thought from you on this. It feels like a tax to me. Well, it's like VAT or something.
Yeah, well, the important thing is to never automatically give in to the so-called charity marketers and have the strength of will to realise that people are being paid to take your money. You know, they're not doing that out of the goodness of their heart. People who are coming after your cash. You know, if you don't feel like it, just have the bravery to say no. Right. What's fine is the automatic checkout machines that you have at supermarkets, for example. They'll often say, you know, top up by a few pence to give this money to this charity. That's fine. But asking someone in person and trying to kind of pull on their heartstrings that way, you can be strong with it.
And I think I would have it as policy that a cashier cannot ask you to pay more to charity, because that's a very public thing to do.
How about one day a year, though? Let me change it. How about one day a year, whether it was when I was growing up, Red Nose Day or something like Ukraine? Because, of course, I don't think a supermarket would tolerate that 365 days a year because they know customers feel uncomfortable. How about one day a year for a cause?
There you go. That could be a great compromise. What do you think? How do you feel about companies asking you to give to charity? Mark at gbnews.uk. It's exactly 10:32 and it's time now for tomorrow's papers. And let's start with the iNews now. We've got the iPaper and here is their front page. Take a look at this. Drought will shrink UK's food crops. Extreme heat is harming key crops, including potatoes and maize, farmers warn. Lack of water will lead to lower yields and smaller vegetables on shelves in supermarkets. Official drought is declared, affecting tens of millions of people across England. 9 out of 10 rivers are running low, with almost a third exceptionally dry. Millions now face new water restrictions to maintain essential supplies. OK, the Times next. Rushdie stabbed up to 15 times in on-stage attack. Truly shocking story. Sir Salman Rushdie, the award-winning author, was stabbed in the neck in a theatre in upstate New York yesterday and was flown in a serious condition for surgery at a nearby hospital. The attacker charged onto the stage as the British author was about to give a talk about the United States being a haven for persecuted writers. Of course, Salman Rushdie, who is now 75, spent nearly a decade in hiding after the Iranian leader Ayatollah Khomeini issued a fatwa or edict calling for his death in 1989 in response to the satanic verses which many Muslims considered to be blasphemous. Now, we don't know if this attack on Salman Rushdie and the publication of the book are related, but a very concerning story nonetheless. OK, Sebastian, where would you like to go next? Let's have a look at the Mirror. Rushdie stabbed, author attacked in US 33 years after Iran fatwa for writing satanic verses. Daily Mail, Rushdie stabbed up to 15 times. Suspect seized. Battle now to save this award-winning author. OK, now we've got the Daily Mail newspaper, and their front page is as follows. Well, we've had that one. Let's move on to our next paper, The Sun, and this is their front page. Rushdie stabbed in neck. Author Salman Rushdie fighting for life last night after stabbed in the neck at a literary event. We don't have any more information about the person that did it, except that they are now in the hands of law enforcement. Daily Express now. Salman Rushdie stabbed in frenzied attack on stage. Again, that story covering most front pages. The Daily Star have it as well. Rushdie stabbed 10 times. And on a slightly lighter, or rather significantly lighter story, unexpected good news as drought hits Britain. Nice beavers as reservoirs and rivers run dry. Boffins reveal these furry favourites could be the answer to our problems. Rivers which are home to magnificent beavers are less likely to dry up, according to boffins at the National Trust. Always good to end on a high note. OK, well, look, reacting to all of those stories from tomorrow's papers are the broadcaster and commentator Lynn May. We also have the former editor of Labour List, presenter and journalist Peter Edwards, and political commentator and author, the one and only Charlie Peters. Well, look, Salman Rushdie seems to be the only show in town, Lynn. A shocking story, but we need more information about who did it.
Definitely. And I think this is extremely concerning, especially when we are faced with a lot of criticism when it comes to freedom of speech. People want to write, comedy, and it seems to be open forum now. Even if you look at certain comedians, when people are just getting on stage and charging towards people, and if we don't clamp down on this, especially in the Western world where we're supposed to have freedom of speech, then it could get out of hand.
Well, indeed. So, look, we've got to be so concerned. You're a journalist, Peter, and you enjoy the benefit of, being on television, on the radio, writing articles without fear of attack for those words.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's remarkable. First of all, the attack happened. It's horrifying. One of my earliest news memories, I was born in 81, was when I was a child in the late 80s of the fatwa, which was wicked in itself. It's interesting that it's splashed so many papers when there's normally such a diversity of stories. They're all on Rushdie, and I suspect The Sun doesn't splash very much on Booker Prize-winning writers. But as Lynn says, it shows, although all papers have been very careful to avoid attribution, we don't know yet if it is a terrorist attack rather than there are other reasons why people commit crime, but it could be terrorism. We'll wait and see tomorrow. But if it is, then it shows how fragile freedoms are and how we have to fight for them through the ballot box and through civil debate.
Indeed. Look, we've got... it is a developing story. We're getting a little bit more information on the news wires, and in particular the BBC on Salman Rushdie. The police press conference has come to an end, and here's what we're hearing from BBC sources. The suspect in the attack has been identified as Hadi Matar, who is 24 years of age, from Fairview in New Jersey. Salman Rushdie is still undergoing surgery at a local trauma centre. Police say that they have no indication for a motive behind the attack, but are working with the FBI to determine the cause. The suspect, Hadi Matar, had an access pass for the event and attended alone. Police are working to determine the charges against Matar. The suspect jumped on stage, stabbed Rushdie in the neck at least once. The Star are reporting 10 times. It seems to have been a frenzied attack either way. And he was also stabbed in the abdomen on at least one occasion. Police had no indication there were any previous threats before the event at which Rushdie was attacked. So that's what we're hearing so far. We'll get you more as and when it comes in. But look, either way, a very, very sorry tale, Charlie.
Yeah, deeply. And what I fear for the most now is that we're going to go online, we'll see comments from people saying, this is a horrifying attack, but he said these things, he said these blasphemous and offensive things, and we have to be careful with our language. And I think I'm very worried that this concern not to offend and to avoid blasphemous or religious discussion is going to allow a creeping censoriousness in our discussions. Now, what's especially troubling is I think we're going to see a return of some of the commentary that happened after the Charlie Hebdo attacks in 2015, where lots of people said, freedom of speech is important, but we cannot allow people to say things that might rile up certain communities. Now, as you said, we don't know how this person was inspired. We still haven't got a motivation for the attack, but we can say that what is likely to be the case is that they were motivated by his commentary on Islam. Now, this is very concerning. This is very troubling. And regardless of what happens to Salman Rushdie, we pray that he pulls through. We have to be very clear and very strong in our defence of freedom of speech.
Well, that's right. You mentioned Charlie Hebdo. This happened on the 7th of January 2015, in which 12 people working at this magazine were murdered, 11 injured because of a blasphemous image of Prophet Muhammad that featured on the front cover of the previous issue of that magazine. Devastating story. At that point, we all said that we're all Frenchmen, we're all French at this point. We stand with the French in relation to free speech. But as Charlie has said, Peter, this will resonate across various issues. I mean, there's the Batley schoolteacher still in hiding for, going apparently too far in relation to revealing the image of the Prophet Muhammad, which is deeply offensive to Muslim people.
Yeah, and even I'm a person of religious faith, but I'm also, like all of you, someone that believes in free speech, and I read Salman Rushdie's books when I was an English undergraduate, and part of art is a right to offend, however uncomfortable we feel. And as a Christian, I've been offended by works of art, but I would not seek to stifle them, and we must kind of retain that spirit, because that is the heart of democracy.
Yeah, and I just have to add, I myself am not a Muslim, but the Quran does say you have to abide by the laws of the land. So if you are living in Britain and there are laws about this thing, then whether you're Muslim or not, you must abide by them. Yeah. And that's incredibly important. And I think we're living in a society now where everyone is hypersensitive. Even if I see something that I don't agree with, I should try my best not to be riled up, as you stated before. And I think that needs to be driven home.
Too right. Very concerning story, Lynn, on the front page of the I newspaper. Drought will shrink UK's food crops. So there's trouble in store. We haven't just got the heat wave, potential fires. We're at the tail end, hopefully, of a pandemic. We're in the grip of an economic crisis, soaring inflation, and now the country's dried out.
Yeah, well, you know, about a month ago, I was saying, get out there, enjoy the sun, and I'm still saying get out there, enjoy. I'm from Barbados. I was born in Barbados. I love the sunshine. And, you know, coming from a sunny island, we crack on there. But at the same time, looking around Epping, where I live, and, you know, everything is looking really dry. And even speaking to a couple of farmers, they were like, we're actually concerned. So I think there is definitely cause for concern.
3 billion litres a day of leaks.
They need to do
something. Sorry to be doom and gloom.
Absolute shocker. I mean, I did ask Ross Clark earlier from the Mail and the Spectator whether water privatisation had failed. I guess you would say yes.
Lack of competition.
But it's emboldened, and I don't want to make everything party political because it's boring, but it's emboldened Conservatives to privatise other assets. You know, the post office is not looking so healthy these days, is it?
No, there's also a big problem with NIMBYism here. I mean, I think the over-regulation of developments for reservoirs has been a disaster. We haven't had a new reservoir in the southeast since 1976, and proposals that have been brought up even this year ahead of this terrible weather were turned down. So we have to consider that as well.
Well, definitely. Let's have a look at some more front pages if we can. We've got the Daily Telegraph now. Let's see what they're leading with. And we've got the following. Rushdie stabbed at literary festival. And also another story on the front page in relation to the weather conditions. Drought officially declared in England after driest July since 1935. We're in a drought. And we're going to pay an economic price. There's an issue also about food availability, Charlie.
Well, at the beginning of the show, I think Lynn was complaining about people flying food in from around the world. What a fantastic time to be doing so, as we cannot grow our own due to these current drought conditions. So I'm very grateful for the global supply chains that have been kind of survived over the pandemic, and thank God for that, because it means we can eat even when we can't feed ourselves.
It's a balance. It's considering what could happen, but as well considering that there could be some scaremongering going. Because I was reading an article saying, you know, we're not going to have any vegetables for Christmas. I mean, is this factual or is this scaremongering, you know?
Well, as we're in the middle of summer, probably at this stage it's scaremongering. If it were in Advent, it might be true, but let's call it scaremongering for now.
How about this in the Daily Telegraph? Councils across the country have been allowing more than half of their office staff to work from home. The Daily Telegraph can disclose an investigation by the paper has found that only 10% of employees at 2 local authorities were based in the office earlier this year. 41 local authorities in England have provided data on the proportion of workers coming into the office, with 28 councils saying that more than 50% of employees worked from home in April. Charlie, is that a good or a bad thing?
Incredibly bad thing. We're talking very much. I mean, the other news has taken over now, but I think until about 2 weeks ago, the main topic on the agenda was Backlog Britain. Don't you remember? Yep. An annoying thing we've all forgotten about now. Passports, driving licence, exactly. So many of these vital civil service-led and council-led issues have just been completely forgotten, have dipped in quality enormously, and there has to be surely a connection between people working less or working more from home and the decline of those services.
I'm going to have to disagree. I work for a local authority and I have been working from home, and our productivity has gone through the roof. So I think it really depends on, you know, what you're doing in the council, the departments you work in, but I would agree, if you're customer-facing, and this is in any industry, you should get into the office. But I do agree that we should start to get back in the office for the simple fact that economy in the surrounding areas is really suffering, whether that's your small businesses, restaurants, cafes. So we do need to head back. However, I would slightly disagree with you because, as I said, productivity is going well.
If work from home has been successful for you, what do you think is the long-term solution? Would it be a day in the office and 4 at home?
Maybe 2, because I don't think it's just about productivity, it's about boosting morale of your team. Even though we've been doing well at home, there's that sort of just popping over to someone's desk, which cuts down the time. Even though productivity is better, I think there's a different energy when you can work as a team together, and working at home, you don't have that team spirit.
Interesting that the Times are running their exam results day guide. What parents need to know about that nerve-wracking moment you open your exam results. Are exams still important, Lynn?
Yes, I think they're important, depending again on what you're doing. I think if you're doing, you know, construction and things of that nature, it's more about hands-on. But I still think exams allows you to concentrate and gear towards something.
So I'm assuming you did your GCSEs and your A-levels.
Yeah.
Tell me about that nerve-wracking moment when you had to open the envelope. Or did you go online to get... I'm showing my age there. You probably just check online, do you?
What, to do my exams?
To get the results.
Oh, no, I walked in.
Is that right? It's on a board somewhere.
For GCSEs, we got it in a paper. My recent exams from university, yeah, I could go online. But from school, I got it in a brown
That must be
envelope.
nerve-wracking when you sort of go online to see whether it's going to be... I mean, in your case, always an A star, obviously.
I don't know about that, but I'm not bad.
Doesn't it dispel the drama, clicking your mouse on a screen rather than getting an old-fashioned brown envelope with slightly nervous, clammy fingers, as Mark and I did?
Because you're with all your friends as well.
Well,
So
of course, yeah.
And then you're like looking for which part of the document has got the grades on it.
Yeah, no, I remember it very well, and you know I did all writing exams, but the nerves but it is nice to be around your friends and your peers when it happens. So I hadn't realised that so much of results was online now.
Yeah, but again, I do think exams are really important, and I think there's a lot of discussion. You know, we need to be careful of young people's mental health and all this nerves, and I think it's important. It builds resilience.
I was very lucky to be always on holidays whenever we had to do our exam results. So, you know, it's August, right? That's when you should be on holiday.
Correct.
My parents always tactically organised holidays around the GCSE and A-level period for myself and my 2 siblings. So there was a kind of this apprentice-style walk away to take the phone, and they would kind of all wait in the boardroom, as it were, by the pool. And then you'd come back, there'd be good news. And if it was bad news, which thankfully it never was, you know, but if there was that kind of nervousness, you've got a holiday to look forward to as soon as it's done. You put the phone down. You're not in England.
No repercussions.
You're not worrying about your future. Your repercussions are your own responsibility.
Do you think we should stick with exams as the way to test the mental acuity of young people? Because there are plenty in education who think that coursework is the way to go. What do you think, Charlie?
Well, we haven't really had exams for 2 years because of the pandemic. So I think it's a forgotten art for a lot of the people who are going to be going through it now.
Some people consider it a blunt tool.
I think, well, the gender split in terms of who does well in exams versus coursework. I think a lot of girls are much better at coursework because they are more focused across the year, spend more time working at home, whereas boys will just think, don't worry, I'll just kind of swat up the last night and wing it, and then they'll just go over the line. So I think an equal balance is best for both people, you know.
Fascinating conversation. Well, lots more to get through. Next up, more from the papers. We've also got a topical game show as well. And is it wrong to give your children expensive presents even if you can afford it? We'll discuss that next.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Lots to squeeze into the last few minutes of the show. We've got tomorrow's papers, and let's have a look now at The Guardian. Here's what they're leading with. Rushdie stabbed on stage at event in New York. Of course, that is the lead story across most of the papers today. And drought declared in many areas as crops start to fail. So there you go. Big problems that lie ahead in relation to the country's food supply. We need that... not very much, do we, at the moment, after what we've been through in the last couple of years. Now, leading reality star Kylie Jenner was given a handbag worth over $100,000 for her birthday. That's a lot of money, even if her family are crazily rich. But is it obscene to spend that much on your kids, even if you can afford it? How much should you be forking out for your kids' birthdays? Charlie?
I always get very kind of upset and distressed when I hear stories about parents feeling very guilty when it comes to Christmas time or birthdays, and they're having a struggle financially. They're working hard, like most parents do, and they feel as though they're not going to sufficiently impress and delight their children. I think it's a miserable feeling to have, and the consumerist pressure on parents, and that often that children unwittingly give to their parents, is really an enormous shame. And I wonder if there's a way of moving back towards kind of appreciating what family gives you beyond gifts, and how we might achieve that.
Yeah, maybe we need to be a bit less materialistic. That would be convenient at the moment, wouldn't it, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I think apart from the fact you're kind of exposing me as a earnest old lefty that doesn't know too much about the Jenners, I think there's a lot to be said for a homemade cake for your son or daughter in the shape of the car, football or sports instrument of their choice.
Sorted.
Yeah, and also it's a lot of money for a handbag.
Look, it's all relative, isn't it? Because you sort of spend a proportion of your income on your kids' gifts. So for a regular family, then maybe a birthday gift is 30, 40, 50 quid perhaps. That's pretty generous, isn't it? Well, these people are so rich, the equivalent is 100 grand. But is it morally wrong to be so generous with your kids?
Where do these morals derive from? And what is expensive? I think anyone that actually starts to pocket watch anybody has a subconscious sort of jealousy, if I'm honest. Because if you are able to buy a gift and it's that much, and like you said, it's relative, their whole social circle, that's probably normal. So I don't understand why this is even a conversation, to be honest. And this is the way of the world. I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's bad, but if we understand that we live in a capitalist society, that is what it is.
Yeah, which is why I've got an 11-year-old Toyota Prius and Joe Rogan has a brand new Tesla. Each to their own, but I wouldn't change a thing because I've got the best job in the world. It's time now to play a Great British Game Show based around that story. We're going to revive The Price is Right. I'm going to ask you at home and my panel to look at a variety of gifts, and you've got to work out how much they actually cost. Some are cheap, some are expensive. Let's start with our first item. And this is a Casio watch with a beautiful silver bracelet. It's got a light and an alarm, and it's water resistant. How much is that?
I believe that's the Foxtrot 81 Whiskey Casio, and it's $25.
Well, listen, I'll give you the money because it's $27.99, which is near enough. The one with the rubber strap is 15 quid. Absolute bargain. I know because I bought one the other day. Great watches. OK, next up, this is a Hermes bag. Bit more than 25 quid, do you think?
13,000.
You're going to go 13,000, Peter Edwards?
I don't buy handbags very often, so I'd say 500 quid.
Oh, 500, OK, and?
10 grand, go on, shake.
Well, you know what? I think, actually, oddly enough, closest is our good friend Peter Edwards.
Yes.
2 grand.
Do I win the handbag?
He does indeed. How about this? This is cutlery.
Oh, that's John Lewis, isn't it?
It is actually, I believe, is it Douche and Gabbana, which is a brand I'm not familiar with. Is it Dolce & Gabbana? If so, that's an outrageous typo. I didn't know they did cutlery. Anyway, designer cutlery, how much is that?
£1,000?
£575.
Nice.
How about a full Lego set? Oh, there you go.
That's a belt, Mark.
Oh, we do love a bit of live telly. This is a leather belt. So is it premium? Is that thousands or is it just a few pennies?
It looks a bit tacky to me. I think it's a tenner.
£50.
You're going 50, Peter Edwards?
25 quid.
It is 1950. Peter Edwards.
Oh, I'm on fire.
OK, next up, what have we got? We got Lego now, and that's Lego Ninjago.
28
plus.
I'll venture 28.99.
I think 89.99.
What did you say, 89?
Yeah.
I'm going to go £60.
Oh, no, it's 74.95. There you go. And a bargain. Who doesn't love a bit of Lego? Thank you so much for your company. Thanks for my amazing panel. And stick around because I'm doing headliners. And I'm back for Mark Dolan tonight, tomorrow at 9. See you then.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGibbon, and here's your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. Warm overnight and then a sunny Saturday for the vast majority. Very hot again in many places. In fact, Saturday marks the peak of the heat for many of us. High pressure still in control of our weather. A weather front close to the Northern Isles continues to bring some low cloud here. And what we've seen over the last 24 hours is some low cloud and mist affecting the coast of eastern Scotland and the far northeast of England. That will creep inland somewhat overnight. And the outbreaks of light rain and drizzle will continue to affect parts of Orkney, Shetland, Lewis and Harris. But elsewhere across the UK, clear spells and a very warm night. Temperatures not dropping much below 18 or 19 Celsius. So a warm start to Saturday, some murkiness around northern and northeastern coasts first thing. I think much of that will retreat back to the beaches by Saturday late morning. And then the afternoon for the vast majority is looking sunny and once again very hot. High 20s for Scotland and Northern Ireland, low 30s for much of England and Wales, and 35 or even 36 for central and southern parts of England as well as East Wales. So unusual temperatures for the UK. The heat by day and the lack of relief by night mean that for some people this can be a health issue and it can cause problems to infrastructure. So an extreme heat warning continues to be enforced through the weekend. Now overnight there will be some thunderstorms breaking out across northern England, parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. That's the first signs of a change on the way. First though, on Sunday, for many places it's another very warm night, a warm start to the day, and then temperatures rise once again into the 30s for much of England, Wales, and another very warm day for southern and eastern Scotland. But northern and western Scotland, Northern Ireland sees thunderstorms develop. Now these will be hit and miss. They'll occur more widely up and down the country on Monday, but where they do occur, the risk of flash flooding.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pint.